Okay, now it is time for us to actually graph some of these linear inequalities. So what we are going to start with is y is greater than 4x minus 3. That is going to be our starting point. So we want to graph this inequality. Now if we look at the steps that were on our first page, the first step is to graph the equation of the line of this line. So that means step 1. We want to write this as an equation. So an equation has an equal sign. That'll be y equals 4x minus 3. So we're just temporarily writing it as an equation to use it to graph. Because we know how to graph this. This has a slope of 4 and a b value of negative 3, or a y-intercept of negative 3. So let's go to negative 3 on the graph. And the slope of 4 tells us we go up 1, 2, 3, 4 over 1. Up 1, 2, 3, 4 over 1. We can also go down 1, 2, 3, 4 and over 1. So here are the points, and now we need to figure out step 2. So step 2 on the front of our page says, determine if the line is solid or dotted, and that depends on the not the absolute value, that depends on the inequality that we have. So if we have this inequality, is it going to be dotted or solid? And the answer is dotted because it is not equal to it. So now we can draw our dotted line through our points. Okay, we've got our dotted line, and we can draw arrows on both sides. Make sure we have arrows on both sides because it goes forever in both directions. Now step 3 says pick a point that is not on the line and test it in the original inequality. So pick a point. The one that I said on the front is the easiest to use is 0, 0. So if 0, 0 is not on the line, which it's not, use that point because that is easiest to plug in. So plug it into the original inequality and we'll see if it holds true. So that will be y is greater than 4 times 0 minus 3. I'm plugging in the x value of 0 here and the y value of 0 here. Now let's see if it's true. The 0 times 4 cancels, so I have 0 is greater than negative 3. Is that true? Is 0 greater than negative 3? Yes, that is true. So that means we are going to shade the area that includes 0, 0. 0, 0 is here, so we are going to shade this entire region here, this half plane. So that is our graph. We have our dotted line here because it's not equal to. We graphed the line 4x minus 3, and we shaded all of this region. So we've got it. That's how we graph this. Now let's look at another example. And if I'm going too fast, at any point, just stop the video, pause it so that you can catch up to me. All right, let's look at y is less than or equal to negative x plus 3. Step 1 tells us to write it as an equation and graph that equation. So that will be y equals negative x plus 3. That is a slope of negative 1. We have a slope of negative 1 and a b value of positive 3. So go to positive 3 on the y-axis. That's here. Slope of negative 1 tells us we're going to go down 1, over 1, down 1, over 1, down 1, over 1, and continue that process. We can also go up 1, left 1, up 1, left 1, etc. All right, we have our dots. Step number 2 says, what kind of line are we going to have? Is it going to be dotted or solid? We have less than or equal to. So is that going to be dotted or solid? That is going to be solid. It's solid because it is equal to it. So now we can draw our line. And remember, we should have arrows on both sides because it goes on and on forever. Now step 3 tells us to pick a point. So again, I'm going to choose the point 0, 0. We have to pick a point that's not on the line and plug it into the original inequality. So that is going to be 0 is less than or equal to negative 0 plus 3. Well, negative 0 is just 0. So we have 0 is less than or equal to 3. Is that true? Yes, it is. 0 is smaller than 3. That is true. So that means we shade the region where 0 is. That is this region. So again, our steps. We take the inequality, put an equal there and graph it. We figure out what kind of line we have. In this case, it's solid. And then we plug in a point, see if it's true. If it is true, we shade where that point is. If it's false, we do not shade where the point is. All right, moving right along. Let's go to the next one. We have x minus 2y is greater than 0. So this one looks a little different than the others because y is not by itself, but that's okay. We can fix that. So let's go to step 1. Step 1 says turn this into an equation. And on our step 1, earlier, we talked about how when we graph the equation, it's easiest if we use slope-intercept form. So that means we want to get y by itself. So to do that, we need to get rid of the x, so we'll subtract x on both sides. And that gives us negative 2y equals negative x. Y is not quite by itself yet, so we want to divide both sides by negative 2. And that gives me that y equals positive 1/2 x. Because a negative over a negative equals a positive. So that's my equation, y equals 1/2 x. That tells me that my slope is 1/2 and that what's my b value? There's nothing here for the y-intercept, so that means it goes through 0, 0. So my b value is 0, and I go up 1 over 2. Up 1, right 2, up 1, right 2, and I can also go down 1, left 2, down 1, left 2, etc. So I have my points. Before I draw my line, I need to figure out whether it is dotted or solid. So we have this greater 2 symbol. Because it doesn't have the or equal to line, it's going to be dotted. So I can use my ruler here to make my line nice. This is going to be a dotted line. And remember, we've got to have arrows on both sides. So I have arrows on both sides. I've got my dotted line. And step 3, we need to pick a point and plug it in. This time we cannot pick 0, 0 because that is on our line. So I'm going to pick the point 1, 2 and plug that in. So we need to plug it into our original inequality. So that is going to be 1 minus 2 times 2 is greater than 0. We want to see if that's true. So we're plotting the point. It is the point 1, 2 here. Now let's see if it's true. 1 minus 4 is greater than 0. That gives us negative 3 is greater than 0. Is that true? No, that's not true. Negative 3 is actually smaller than 0. That's false. So that means we are not going to graph the area that has that point. We're not going to shade that area. So we are going to shade the opposite area, shade this area. So if we plug in a point and that point is false, we get something that's not true, then we shade the area that does not have that point, the half plane that doesn't have that point. Let's look at a linear inequality that's a little different. So if I have y is greater than or equal to 5, that's a little different because there's no x. So first of all, we want to graph the line y equals 5. We want to graph that line. So y equals 5 is a horizontal line. Remember, y equals is horizontal, where all of the y values are 5. So that's going to be this line here at these points, y equals 5. Then we need to know, step 2 is this a dotted line or a solid line? Well, because it's equal to, it's going to be solid. So we can draw a solid line through these points at y equals 5. Arrows on both ends. And then lastly, we can plug in a point and figure out if it is true. So again, I'm going to use the point 0, 0 because it's not on the line. So I have 0. Because 0 is y, 0 is greater than or equal to 5. Is that true? No, it is not. 0 is not bigger than 5. So because that's false, we shade the region that doesn't include the point. That is that region. So that one's a little easier because we don't have an x. Now let's look at one where we don't have a y. So if I have x is less than 2, step 1, I'm going to graph x equals 2. Now what kind of line is that? That is going to be a vertical line at x equals 2. So I'll have a line going through these points here at x equals 2. Second step, we want to know what kind of line this is. We have less than 2, so that is going to be a dotted line. A dotted line here. and arrows on both sides. Then thirdly, we want to know if our point lies in that area. So pick a point. As usual, I will choose 0, 0 because it's not on the line and plug it in. Is 0 less than 2? And that is true. Yes, 0 is less than 2. So I'm going to shade the part that has 0 being less than 2. That is that area there. We are going to skip number 6, take a short break so that you can answer some questions, and we will come back to look at the last 3 problems. That will be a shorter video. So just hang on, do a few questions, and we'll be back.